Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Red Raptor Writes, Tyrannosaurus Rex. What can I say about this magnificent creature that hasn't been repeated 1,000 times before? It is by far the most popular dinosaur and prehistoric animal in general. It's appeared in countless movies, shows, and documentaries. So many documentaries. I can easily claim that Tyrannosaurus has had more dino docs written about it than any other dinosaur. That's why it appears constantly on my channel. There's no way I can get to every single film on it or have anything new to say each time, but hey, wanna see a terrible one with me? T-Rex An Evolutionary Journey is nonsensical enough to fall into the so bad it's good category. Here we see the evolution from nimble Jurassic predators to the mighty T-Rex at the end of the Cretaceous. A great concept with abysmal execution. What a great follow-up to Dinosaur Britain. So guys, let's dig this up. I'll be honest, it's difficult to come up with many positives for this one. Even the small details I can compliment are firmly wrapped up in loads of trash. To prevent this video from becoming a super choppy mess, I have to break my format by discussing T-Rex An Evolutionary Journey in the order it presents information, rather than by positives, outdated, and negatives. A small price to pay for salvation. Sure, you can call this movie so bad that it broke the channel. Unlike the very worst documentaries we've seen, at least the main point in Evolutionary Journey is kind of intact. Us audiences are guided through time and space, following the supposed lineage leading up to Tyrannosaurus. The main concept, the thesis if you will, isn't done well at all, but makes sense as opposed to Valley of the T-Rex, where the thesis was total garbage. We see Tyrannosauroids branching off here in the Middle Jurassic, correctly identified at 168 million years ago. The idea of the mighty Tyrannosaurus coming from nimble, fluffy theropods holds up. They started small, and while a few attained larger sizes early on, the famed large carnivores didn't appear until much later into the late Cretaceous, about 80 million years ago. China's Guan kicks things off, which, okay, I talked about this one before, because Guanlong's whole claim to fame has been as an early Tyrannosaurus ancestor. It's one of the sad examples of a dinosaur only featured as a proxy to a more famous relative, rather than learning about it in itself. Unfortunately for the narrative, Guanlong isn't a direct ancestor to the later Tyrannosaurids, as in, they did not descend from Guanlong. I mentioned this before, but Guanlong branched off from their lineage along with other Proceratosaurids. Think of them more as an uncle group. The grandparents are ancestral to both you and your uncle, but your uncle is not your ancestor unless you live in Alabama. Even in the cladograms presented for the Tyrannosaurid family tree, they show Guanlong and the Proceratosaurids branching early and dying out, yet constantly they spout that they evolved into T-Rex. It is nice to have the paleontologist Dr. Stephen Brussetti explaining phylogenetic analyses, comparing sometimes hundreds of traits across an entire group of animals to see who's more closely related to who. Where do they fit in the family tree? I've made rudimentary, bare bones cladograms before in my videos since they're such useful visuals for mapping and studying family trees. When explaining the common ancestry mistake though, the narrator stumbles into a really stupid line.
How did such a small and relatively weak creature eventually lead to T-Rex, the largest dinosaur of them all?
Sauropods? Psh, never heard of them. Gigantosaurus who? Before I move on, these poor Proceratosaurids deserve some more attention. Opposite of what the name suggests, this family was not closely related to my favorite dino, Ceratosaurus, though this was thought to be the case when Proceratosaurus was first found. Other members besides these two are Calescus, Eutyrannus, and Sinotyrannus. Family members are known from, most apparently, long three-fingered grasping arms, and most had a distinctive head crest above their snouts, though they also had tyrannosaurid features like an arctometatarsallian condition, fused nasal bones, and meat-scraping D-shaped teeth at the front of their mouths. Though typically small, Guanlong is rightfully placed at 3 meters, Eutyrannus and Sinotyrannus were able to achieve larger sizes in the early Cretaceous. Next up in the movie comes Moros, a basal member of the recently erected Pantyrannosauria, a clade that really means all tyrannosauroids that don't fall into Proceratosauridae. Well, no name is given for this next creature, but considering it's a human-sized Tyrannosauroid from Utah 96 million years ago, yeah, this is clearly what will be named Moros intrepidus, although that description wouldn't come until 2019. This is a fitting inclusion for sure, since the generic name Moros is the Greek embodiment of impending doom, and the specific name intrepidus refers to being adventurous, as it showed more primitive tyrannosauroids venturing into the North American continent from their Asian cradle. Thankfully, this is displayed when a pair of them cross a land bridge into the New World. Faunal exchanges between what would become Asia and North America is something I wish was shown off more and more closely studied. It's a subject I wish got more attention in paleo media because loads of comparisons can be made between the two continents during the late Cretaceous. They come across as two different versions of the same ecosystem. Think Seventh Samurai and the Magnificent Seven. The latter was the American version based on the former. They have the same plot and similar characters, but with different actors filling each role. Pachycephalosaurids and ornithomimids filled smaller herbivore niches. Hadrosaurids and Titanosaurians acted as the large herbivores, Dromaeosaurids and Troodontids were the smaller carnivores, and Tyrannosaurids served the apex predator niche. So many kinds of dinosaurs live between the two continents, and I didn't even get to all of them. I would love to see more material on these exchanges. With that being said, I am giving the creators another strike because there's a strange disparity between what is shown and what is told. We're told that about 95 million years ago, Moros, or at least its ancestor, traveled over to North America and established itself as a small predator in the shadow of the still dominant Allosauroids, who we'll get to soon. There is truth to that, though what we're shown is how two Moros siblings migrated, instantly got clapped by the larger Seats, but the more advanced Timurlangia was able to thrive. There's some truth to this too. Fragments of its brain case suggest how, even with its smaller 3 or 4 meter size, this genus was already developing more derived features found in the later Tyrannosaurids. Now, paleontologists know that this lineage had already evolved a more complex brain structure with well-developed senses before they attained apex predator status. The species name that I won't even try to pronounce is Greek for well-eared, a name given because of their ability to hear low-frequency sounds with their long inner ear canals. The Dino Doc calls this a defense mechanism against larger predators. And here come the negatives again. There's no positives that haven't been outright ruined. Each compliment comes with caveats, hence why my usual structure doesn't work here. There is no evidence of Timurlangia appearing in the United States. None of them would have been able to run for president, though maybe this is the change we need in Washington. Nah, material from this genus has only been found in the Besekti Formation in Uzbekistan, so arriving and thriving in North America is ridiculous. Okay, now that brings me to Seats, an obscure large carnivore I thought would never appear on the channel. This is a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. Seats comes from the later Muscontucket member of the Cedar Mountain Formation, which in itself stretched far back into the early Cretaceous. But correctly shown, this meat-eater did live with the much smaller Moros in Utah about 95 million years ago, and it filled the role as top predator at the time. Maybe that's the writers being diligent, or maybe it's a happy accident having these two together, because, oh boy, Seats is portrayed as the master of time and space as it seems to live on forever. Yeah, it's correctly placed with Moros, but then appears again to greet Lithonax 15 million years later. So from their point of view, I guess Seats always patrolled the continent. As for the design, well, it's tough to make any definitive statements. The classification history of this taxon has been a nightmare. Evolutionary Journey places it as an Allosaurus relative, though whether that means an Allosaurid or just an Allosauroid in general is unclear. I would consider this part outdated since it was initially determined to be a Megaraptoran Neovenatorid, a confusing classification on its own. Neovenator has recently been uncovered as a more basal Carcharodontosaurid, and Megaraptora, that's an oof and a half. Going from a placement within Neovenatoridae, if that's even still a thing, to a strange offshoot of Tyrannosauroidea, and maybe a non-Tyrannosauroid Coelurosaurian. So if Seats is a Megaraptoran, then where the heck do they go? If it groups outside of that mysterious clade, Then where in Shrek does Seats go? It's seen similar placements even outside of Megaraptora. To make matters worse, this genus is known from only partial postcranial remains, so whatever the heck Seats is, whatever, they tried their best. I wish we got to learn more about Seats, but this documentary just cuts out the paleo experts mid-speech.
They were quite small. They were living in the shadow of dinosaurs like Seats.
Lythronax really was the top predator in its ecosystem.
And that's another large-bodied tyrannosaur.
Apparently whoever created this just didn't find the paleontologists interesting and cut them off whenever they felt like it. Okay, it was nice to have you, Seats. Too bad that's not the only creature seen by Moros. But no, when venturing into the New World and surviving just about as well as the Jamestown residents, they encounter some random sauropod and Triceratops. The horrible three-horned face gets absolutely butchered here. I gave Seats a hard time before. Nah, this dino makes Marty McFly look like a chump with all the time travel. Somehow it is found in North America during the Cenomanian stage of the late Cretaceous with Moros, and with Lythronax in the early Campanian when it actually lived in the later Maastrichtian at the very end of the Cretaceous. When Lawrence Whitmer, the skull CAT scan guy who constantly appears in these programs, talks about the developed cerebrum of Tyrannosaurus and how it may have been smart enough for cooperative hunting, the animators just shout, "Screw you," and animate Lythronax hunting the trike instead. 15 million years too early.
And also, what the heck, dude?
I thought a clear distinction was made between the brown Lythronax and gray T-Rex, but apparently this documentary just sees them as interchangeable. That's not even the worst part. When discussing the coevolution, the arms race between Tyrannosauroids and Ceratopsians, well, that's a very interesting subject to explore, but the entire suborder of Ceratopsia is confused with the genus Triceratops, so the stupid narrator claims that
Triceratops fossils have been found from Eurasia to North America.
Here, please hit me as hard as you can.
I thought this went without saying, but apparently not. Triceratops is found only in Canada and the United States, not across Eurasia. Heck, the film even showed what looked to be some early Ceratopsian, maybe a derpy Mongolian Microceratus, because yeah, they saw their origins in Asia, though they were really bipedal at the time. So if they just said Ceratopsian fossils have been found from Eurasia to North America, that would have made sense, but the narrator had to say Triceratops. Their design isn't good either. To me at least, their beaks are far too short with this blunt puppy face, and the horns are each too small as well. After getting those beautiful prehistoric kingdom models, everything else just seems like cringe by comparison. Before I continue with the actual Tyrannosaurids, well, there's the problem. This documentary keeps referring to all of them as Tyrannosaurs. For those of you who've been subscribed for some time, should know how big a pet peeve of mine this is, because the term Tyrannosaur is used so frequently that it has no meaning. This term can refer to members of Tyrannosauroidea, or to members of the Tyrannosauridae family, or to members of the Tyrannosaurinae subfamily, Tyrannosaurids closer to T-Rex and Albertosaurus, or very often, just lazy talk for the genus Tyrannosaurus itself. In a movie specifically about the evolution of T-Rex and its family relations, you better be very clear on what you mean. As you've noticed, I constantly clarify Tyrannosauroid for members of the superfamily, Tyrannosaurid for members of the family, Tyrannosaurine for members of the subfamily, and Tyrannosaurus or T-Rex for that genus or species. Rex is the only species in the genus, so either works for my purposes. I make it explicitly clear what I mean, but just saying Tyrannosaur is so sloppy. What's also annoying is how commonly the term species is used to refer to a genus. A species constitutes a group of individual animals that have extremely similar morphology with a population capable of breeding. A genus is a natural grouping of species with only minor differences. Some genera, like Tyrannosaurus, have only one species though. Take Panthera for example. Panthera is a genus of cats. But then there are species, Panthera leo, which are lions, Panthera onca, jaguars, Panthera tigris, tigers, and so on. They're each very similar animals, but with minor differences, so you can't count them as the same species. Most of the time, they don't interbreed. So yeah, the two classifications are not interchangeable. Okay, now the inclusion of Lithonax is... it is correctly sized at 8 meters long, and the time given of about 80 million years ago is close enough. Its importance is also well stated as bridging the gap between the small, non-tyrannosaurid tyrannosauroids and the large apex predator tyrannosaurids. The Gore King is the earliest known tyrannosaurid and starts the family's reign over North America and Asia, though I'm sure more finds will give us a better understanding of this transition. My problem with it and the briefly seen Nanuqsaurus is how they're essentially just Tyrannosaurus reskins, and not even accurate T-Rex. Nah, this is exaggerated, ugly pop culture T-Rex being reused. Their snouts are super round and blunt, rather than looking like an actual snout. Like, yes, Lithonax was pretty bulky even for a member of this family, but this is insane. Even with feathers, they're still more shrink-wrapped than Agrippa. Wrists throughout the documentary range from pronated and broken to halfway broken, like Batman doing an interrogation when he's right about to break you if you don't answer. And you've probably noticed by now the abundance of feathers. Well, yes, the Proceratosaurids definitely had them, as well as some more basal Tyrannosauroids, they should not be present in Tyrannosaurus. I mean, really? They're depicted with wing feathers. Ugh, the 2010s. 2016 is right in that era of feathers gone rampant. They were chucked onto every dinosaur indiscriminately because more feathers must mean more accurate all the time. Even Seats is fluffy here. A large Allosauroid. Why? When you're that big, insulating feathers lose their usefulness. You're not worried about heat escaping, you're worried about overheating. Dinosauria is a very diverse clade with a wide variety of integument. Shoving feathers everywhere is not a good thing. Gosh, I'm glad this era died. Can we leave this idea in the past, please? At this point, I may as well move on to T-Rex itself. Now, there are some positives here. The powerful binocular vision is highlighted, and so is their superb sense of smell. Even the bite force is accurately stated to be up to 60,000 newtons, or about 13,000 pounds of force. There's some good information here. Too bad you need to sift past all the nonsense and garbage to get there. A great example of nonsense is their speed. Throughout the Dino doc, T-Rex is shown sprinting around like emus on drugs. Then the narrator backs this up by claiming that some individuals could have moved as fast as 50 kilometers per hour. This is double more recent conservative estimates that range within the teens, depending on the metrics used. I covered this in such depth recently in my Jurassic Park accuracy review. Go check that out to see more. But not only are they too fast, but they're super agile, leaping straight into the air.
I have no words. Nothing.
How? How on earth is an 8-ton Tyrannosaurus supposed to leap and bound better than Zaboomafoo? The roaring, sprinting, and leaping might all be wrong, but there is some face biting shown in a neat addition. The Chad Dave Hone even comes to explain it. We know Tyrannosaurids did engage in intraspecific combat. Whether the disputes were territorial, competition over food, or competition over mates, they solved their problems by munching on each other. Holes in the lower jaw of the famed Sioux specimen have been hypothesized to either have been caused by face biting or by a parasitic infection, though the exact cause is still debated. Similarly, the teenage Jane specimen has bite marks on its snout that were likely caused by another angsty teen. This is a great inclusion. Going back to the negatives, they get the lineage leading the T-Rex all wrong. The implications I get from this are that scrappy Tyrannosauroid ancestors moved into North America, evolved into Tyrannosaurids, and those North American Tyrannosaurids evolved into Tyrannosaurus. Yeah, no, that wasn't the case. Despite living in western North America at the end of the Cretaceous, T-Rex actually came from far more recent Asian ancestors. Looking at cladograms, you can see that Tyrannosaurus groups with its Asian family members rather than the American ones. Tarbosaurus and Zhuchang tyrannus are its two closest relatives. What most likely happened was that the T-Rex ancestor immigrated from Asia into Laramidia during the Maastrichtian, and this new invasive species outcompeted the already established predators like Albertosaurus. So there wasn't just one wave of immigrants in the Cenomanian stage, but multiple waves, lineages exchanging back and forth across a land bridge. Alright, now there's a lot to talk about here. Evolutionary Journey has some ups and lots of downs. I would be here forever if I tried to tackle every point, every single dumb claim made, so I'll leave it at this.
Certain creatures alive today are descended from a branch of the Tyrannosaur family. Birds.
You can't keep getting away with it! You can't keep getting away with it!
How? Who wrote this? How wasted do you have to be to say that birds descended from the Tyrannosaurids? Birds are far closer to troodontids and dromaeosaurids and other pares than T-Rex's family. This is such madness, pure madness. No, I'm done. T-Rex An Evolutionary Journey is a suckish dinosaur documentary. It takes such a great concept and craps all over it with suckish designs, dumb lines from the narrator, a sloppy superfamily tree, and traveling throughout time and space. But maybe I'm going soft. There are some bright spots, some areas that I can point to and see obvious effort. Evolutionary Journey tried and failed, but I can still tell they tried. Oh, I'm gonna hate myself for this, but I think T-Rex An Evolutionary Journey should be smacked with the very lowest, very, very lowest D-. This wasn't a complete and total failure, but still a very embarrassing display of incompetence. I have no idea how this was released. Where's the quality control? Well, that's assuming the filmmakers actually cared. Anyways, remember if you enjoyed this video to please leave a like, subscribe, and to check out my social media. See you next time.